the things about the narrative that we're talking about today that I heard so far is recalibrating our thinking, making sure that we're constantly making ourselves relevant, exposing ourselves to different conversations, dialogue, etc. One thing that I've done for a lot of years, and it's been about 35 years now, when I was in law school at Howard University, is I decided to eradicate, purge, sanitize, obliterate, and annihilate the use of this word. The word that I'm talking about is the word problem. Everything for me, and Danny was nice enough when he was still practicing. He and I are both recovering lawyers. You've never heard that term before? So one of the things that I embraced some years ago is 5 letters. It's called STRAS. Everything for me is a situation that requires a solution. I don't use the P word at all. And it has changed my life personally and professionally. So let's try to do that, because sometimes when we think about the P word, it affects our anxiety, our stress, our hypertension, maybe our chakras. So everything for me, I have not used that word. No one in my house uses the word. My business partner, my 2 sons, my grandson, my daughter-in-law, we use situations that require solutions because they're action-oriented, and it requires us to do what? Get away from suspended animation. So let's think about that as a way of reframing and recalibrating the way we look at things. So our next panel is a group, of course, and 2 of our colleagues are doing, Shara and Angela doing double duty. They're doing some heavy lifting. I mean, they came 250 miles away, so we're going to make sure we utilize their institutional knowledge. Find your calling, what you have a passion for in this gig economy. Who's leading this distinguished panel is someone you've met already, Dr. Sharna Stryer. And I'm going to just quickly introduce her again, and then I'm going to yield the seat here, and she's going to do the job of facilitating. She's an expert in human sexuality, intimacy, and relationships. I thought that was intriguing. She's a psychotherapist, which is her sweet spot. She's been a professor at a number of universities, Seton Hall University, Hunter College, and the University of Michigan. Go Wolverines. Big fan of that organization until they ran into some challenges, intense periods of heat. And she does written work both on a national level in both radio and TV. Dr. Stryer is going to walk us through the next panel. Let's give her a nice round of applause.
You know, I have the privilege of working with oftentimes millennials in their pursuit of trying to find their avenue through life. And what I find is that it's really hard. You know, we're talking about find your passion, access your creativity. All of that is a process that I'm involved in because it involves, in some ways, clearing our minds to what is truly our beliefs. So I don't know if you've encountered it, but as we go through that process, what are our goalposts? What is truly our belief? Is it our parents? Is it our peers? Is it society? How do we determine what values we have and how we value ourselves? Because ultimately, and what this panel is going to talk about, is the importance of our self-esteem and our sense of vitality and feeling a sense of importance and purpose in our lives and in society at large. So with that idea, let's start with our panel. We're going to first start with Janet Shaw, who is a program director of the Encore Fellowship Program, a nonprofit organization celebrating its 20th year of innovation, which focuses on changing the story of a new stage of life and work and creating pathways to engage people in the second half of their life. She also has a personal story, which I think captures what probably brought her to her work, which she's going to share with us. So Janet, why don't you begin?
Thank you, Sharna. It's a pleasure to be here this morning, and I thank you all for giving me the opportunity to share my story with you. As Sharna said, I am program director of the Encore Fellowship Program based in the New York office of Encore.org. the nonprofit focused on creating pathways to engage people in the second half of life as a vital resource of talent for work that benefits society. And I'm repeating that because I think it's a very important focus. We are a resource, we're a vital resource, and there are many of us who are interested in looking at the social sector but don't know how to get there. I'm going to provide you with information about the Encore Fellowship Program, but first I do want to share a personal story. About 5 years ago, after a successful 30-year career in the medical communications industry, I had trained my successor, and I had to start wondering what was next. Was this all there was going to be? Would I continue to spend my time on the New Jersey Turnpike, and I'm not insulting anyone here who might be doing that, so, or hopping on and off planes to meet with pharmaceutical companies about drugs that may never make it to the market? I knew the answer was no, and I hoped to be able to find a way to utilize my skills and expertise for the greater good, and that's the only thing I knew. That's what I talked about, although I wasn't exactly sure how to go about doing it. After a few missteps, and I don't mind now sharing with you what those missteps were, of course, I had an opportunity to go back to my industry, and I said, great, I'll be a consultant. Well, that was a mistake. I was done, and I knew it, and I should not have gone back, but I did. I also thought everyone would want to speak with me, and while they did want to speak with me, I had no idea they were going to think that I was overqualified, expensive, and perhaps too old to be making a career change. So I found my way to Encore.org, and I applied to be an Encore Fellow, and I was an Encore Fellow with Planned Parenthood Global, utilizing my medical marketing and communication skills to develop marketing plans for 3 global initiatives. My fellowship was 1,000 hours, and that's a standard number of hours for a fellowship, over a period of 12 months, which is about 2.5 days a week. And it gave me the opportunity to understand how nonprofits worked. Clearly a sector I didn't know anything about. So I learned that it was a different pace from the for-profit sector, that it was a different decision-making process, and even a different language. Imagine after spending 30 years being focused on competitors. Who was the competitor? How are we going to deal with competitors? I learned in the social sector, there are no competitors, we're all partners. So I had to learn the pace, decision-making process, and a new language. And in addition, it gave me the opportunity to explore how my prior career skills and experience might transition to this social sector. A key takeaway for me personally was that mission alignment was really important. And while I knew that mission work was something I had a passion for, I needed to really find the mission that I was passionate about. So that brings me to what I do now, something that I'm hoping will be of interest to many of you here today, as you're thinking about how to shift your mindset and your skill set. So yes, it is possible to think about doing it, but many times we need bridges to help us get there. So the Encore Fellowship Program believes that people later in life are a great and growing natural resource. And to date, since 2009, we have matched thousands of people, professionals, like many of us in the room here today. We've matched thousands of skilled professionals with social service organizations that need their skills and expertise. Fellows bring a wealth of skills, and yes, it is of a certain professional level, but it's an example of something that you might want to take advantage of. Skills in marketing, human resources, financial management, strategy and planning, really all of the skills that all businesses need. But many social sector organizations can't necessarily find them. So we bring our skills to the organization and help them build capacity, grow strategically, and ultimately have a broader impact on the communities that they serve. So, based on my experience personally, as well as the work that I do in my Encore career, and I need to say that 3 years into my Encore career, I think I may love it as much as I loved my first 30-year career. But some learnings that I want to share with you today. And I think the first is, and some people touched on it in the last panel, the desire for purpose beyond self exists. And other generations realize that now sooner than we do. We are just now thinking about it, but nevertheless, we're looking at what our legacy is going to look like. And there is an option to do the work, the kind of work that you want to do. But careers are a collection of transitions. And so at every stage, you need to think about what is that transition? Where is it leading me? And how am I going to get there? Because one size does not fit all. The social sector is now interacting with the gig economy, and you may be employed, you part-time, full-time, sometime. You may consult, you may volunteer, you may be on a board, or some combination of all of those things. But as I said, there is the opportunity to do the work that you'd like to do if you think about it as a journey. And we need to try things. We need to assess results, and we need to try something else if it's not working for us. So perhaps the Encore Fellowship could provide some of you the start to working in the social sector. Thank you.
Thank you, Janet. Next, we're going to hear from Leslie Mallon. Mallon.
Hello, everyone. I'm like so happy to be here. Thank you so much. What an amazing group of people. I'm going to approach this from a different perspective, I think, than others. Perhaps it's because of my own background as a psychotherapist and as a coach, but it's also because of my own journey. So I'll give you a taste of a journey. Dan had asked for, moments of, what did you call it, Dan? Intense heat. Okay, so, okay, there you go. And so those are the moments when transitions and awareness often happen. It's not often a gradual kind of, thank you. It's often not a gradual move into awareness. Sometimes we're hit over the head by a 2x4. And we begin to see our lives and our purpose and what we're doing in very different ways. And that happened to me about over 20 years ago, where at that point in time I was working with corporations doing training and development work. And so I would go in and, everything from leadership to team building, that kind of thing. And I had begun to feel somewhat uneasy about that work because I felt like the corporate management was saying to me, you fix them, meaning the employees, but I really want no part of the process. That was my experience. They never showed up at trainings. They never did anything, therefore, to back the training that they were paying for, that kind of thing. And along came an offer of a very large contract, lots of dollar signs, blinded by the light, right? And I knew intuitively, I said to myself, this really isn't for me. But because I was so attracted at that point to the size of the contract, that I pushed my intuition away, and I went ahead anyway. And it was for a very large corporation on Long Island, lots and lots of employees, and the subject was customer service. And my perspective on customer service was that if senior management and management did not perceive their employees as their first customer, then customer service went out the window. Because people need to be esteemed and appreciated and supported and trained. This went over great with the employees and their support that they got and the value they brought. And senior management hated me, and I wasn't too in love with them either. And I had never had an experience like that. So in my mind, because senior management was so annoyed and angry at me, the project went on, but at the end I was shocked and totally thrown off course. And I literally went into a month, maybe 6 weeks, maybe longer, who remembers, where I literally was frozen. I wasn't depressed, I wasn't anxious, I just was frozen. And I remember a friend coming to me and she said to me, well, what are you going to do about this? Lots of anxiety, which I totally wasn't feeling. I said, I'm listening. Didn't even know where that came from. And she said to me, listening for what? And I said, I don't know, but when I hear it, I will know. And what I heard just from being willing to stop, being willing to go quiet, being willing to listen to myself and not all the chatter from outside, what I really learned was that I no longer could do that work because it was not in congruence with who I was and what I believed. As a psychotherapist, I wouldn't work with a dysfunctional family and allow the parents not to be in the room. So how could I possibly do this for corporations, which were in effect dysfunctional families? And that gave me the courage to recognize that whatever I chose going forward had to have meaning for me. It had to align with what I thought was important, not what other people wanted me to do. And that was a giant risk, because I was in a gig economy primarily my whole professional life. Private practitioner, training and development, it was my own company, coaching my own company. I've been doing independent work with little pieces of working for organizations and nonprofits in between. So what I kind of want to bring to this discussion is, there's a famous Hasidic story about a rabbi who's nearing his death. And he says to his congregation and the people surrounding him, in the days to come, they won't ask me why I was not Moses. They will ask me why I was not Zusa. So whatever we do in this gig economy, bigger economy, independent entrepreneurship, whatever we are led to, the most important thing for me is the questions of who am I really, not for other people, but for myself? What has meaning and value for me? And what can I bring to the world? Because that's bringing myself. And it may not be right for everyone, and that's perfectly okay. And I think passion is a hard thing to define. Purpose is a hard thing to define for people. I don't think it's easily accessible to us in language, but it is if we move forward and are willing to allow ourselves to crack open, if you will, and look at our strengths, our weaknesses, and give up our need for self-importance, self-aggrandizement, ambition. Aging is a time where we move from ambition to meaning and from being to doing. And I think if we can keep that in our hearts and in our minds, we won't have a problem finding a way to earn a living. Thank you.
Leslie, thank you so much. That was very heartwarming too, and spoke to me. So next, we're going to hear again from Shira Harrington.
So Leslie just talked a little bit about shifting mindset. So I'm going to talk about shifting skill set. Is that okay? We do that? And I'm actually going to riff off of what I alluded to earlier to address the gentleman's question about passion, right? And I have an exercise, and I'd like to get pretty specific with this, if that's okay, to teach you all and impart an exercise that actually has 3 different parts. It's a very, very practical exercise. Now, it can be certainly repurposed for the gig economy, freelancing, small business, as we're talking about today. But by the way, this is repurposable for anybody going through any kind of career transition, from the youngest to the oldest. It has a lot of sort of elasticity to it. So the first piece is what I call passiontivity. Okay? So passiontivity, the definition is where passion and productivity meet. And the idea is that when you have developed skills, which of course they're always evolving, where you can find the intersection between where you're highly skilled and highly motivated, you're going to be highly engaged. In fact, it's an HR term, and a highly engaged employee is someone who goes above and beyond their work because they want to, not because they have to. And that absolutely applies to the conversation that we're having today. Because when you can tap into those skills and repurpose the ones that actually give you joy, where you are excellent at it, you're motivated to do it, those are skills that can be repurposed. And I'm going to give you 4 different quadrants to look at. So that first is what I just mentioned, high skill, high motivation. The second quadrant, and these other three quadrants are actually kind of a contrast to the first. The second quadrant is high skill, low motivation. That's what I call stopgap work. These are things that you've done in your life. You are good at them. I mean, no one would deny it. You wouldn't deny it. Doesn't really give you a lot of joy in life. You know what I'm talking? Anybody ever? Right? Yeah, right. And actually, it is often where an employer will try to keep you kind of little, kind of push down, and might even try to offer you a promotion. Ever been there? And you're like, thank you, no, right? Because they never really asked you, do you enjoy doing the work? So there is a distinction between your skills. We talk about strengths, right? In fact, Jack Welch, we promote people based on their strengths. I would disagree. Promote people based upon the strengths that they have, coupled with where they're passionate. And again, it's repurposable, and I'll show you that in a second. The third quadrant is high motivation, low skill. These are areas of professional development, and may I say and suggest, especially in the gig economy, absolutely opportunities to develop and to kind of expand your skill set into a whole new area that maybe you never even had the opportunity to do in your professional life. And then finally, there's low skill, low motivation, which is disengagement, right? These are the things we want to stay away from. And may I suggest also, in the freelance and small business world, you may want to outsource that yourself, right? Go get the partner who can come alongside you when you love to market and they love to do accounting. God bless you, go do it, right? So you can have a lot of alliance partners in your life. So I want to go back to the high skill, high motivation quadrant and give you two more techniques that you can repurpose. And one is what I call, it's going to sound a little funny, but it'll make sense in a second. I call it ing versus ing versus er. An ing skill versus an profession. What do I mean by that? So I'll give you an example. Writing is a skill that I'm sure all of us have in this room to varying degrees, right? We all know how to write. But writing is different than being a writer. Yeah, that's the profession. Event planning, event planner, right? And goes on and on. Accounting, accountant. And why do I say that? Because oftentimes in our traditional professional knowledge worker careers, and yes, I am fixating on that segment, that's kind of hammer and nail, that's my nail, okay, professional workforce. When we look at our professional skills that we've developed, because they often are under this rubric of a traditional title and a career path in a certain industry, right? It looks and sounds a certain way. All of those skill sets kind of come into this sort of this bunch. But if you can accordion it, pull it all apart, re-examine the skills that you have already developed, repurpose them, you can actually go from ings to ers. Let me give you an example. So I had a coaching client once, her name was Jacqueline. Actually, she lives around here. And she was the #1 executive for a nonprofit. And we came in, and she had no intention of doing the small business. She just was looking for another job, right? Wanted to be another executive. So we sat down and we did passiontivity, and I had her do the skill set. And in her high skill, high motivation box, as you'd imagine, she had a lot of different things: board relations and all financial planning, all these different things that an executive director does. And I said, Aunt Jacqueline, I want you to look over this high skill, high motivation box, but with a new lens. Now I want you to do the ing and the What I want you to do is look through these 7 different skills that you listed there. And I want you to notice any of these skills that you enjoy doing so much, you could actually see yourself doing it full time. And she takes a look, and in about 30 seconds, her eyes bulge out of her head. She basically jumps across the table. She goes, event planning. I said, event planning? She says, no, you don't understand. Donor events. I said, oh, do tell. And she says, well, you don't understand. When I put on donor events, I mean, the donors, they're laughing, they're crying. We have pictures of the kids on the walls and this and that and the whole thing. She says, I am so good at it. She says, I have other nonprofit executive friends of mine asking me to help them with their donor events. I said, Jacqueline, do you actually think maybe, just maybe, you might consider doing this as a small business? She goes, uh-huh. Human Impact Events was born. Just because we were able to repurpose this passion of hers that she was also unbelievably strong at, airlift it out, turn it into a business where there was an absolute, what nonprofit doesn't want more impactful donor events, right? So she was able to address the need and say, I'm skilled at it, I love to do it, I'm going to give discretionary effort. Now I need the rubric of how to actually launch on my own. Now that was a different conversation, right? In terms of her skill sets. And the last thing I'll share, and I know I'm running out of time, is another concept that I call tribe versus lane. Now, you might have heard these two terms in different contexts. Here's the context that I'm going to use them. Tribe versus lane. I consider a tribe the industry, mission, or sector that you might happen to serve. So you might be in the nonprofit tribe, you might be in the healthcare tribe, you might be in the financial services tribe, the government tribe, education, what have you. Could that be important? Because especially if you're going gig or small business, and even if you're not, you speak a certain language that others don't. So my tribe, for the most part, happens to be trade associations. I'm in DC, I'm entitled, right? So that's what we do. But in my recruiting lane, and the lane is your profession, it's your occupation. In that lane, I serve a particular tribe. I speak their language. I understand the challenges that keep them up at night. I get the urgent problems that I can help them solve. In my career coaching, I'm cross-tribal. I can serve anyone. So your tribe is who you serve. Your lane is how you serve. And if you can to the ing and the repurpose those skills, then think, well, do I really want to be cross-tribal? Let's say I want to do event planning or marketing or HR. Sure, there might be various sectors I can serve, but maybe, just maybe, in the course of your career, or maybe even an area of passion that you might have, you might be developing skills and an interest in another tribe that you can now start learning what are the urgent problems keeping that tribe up at night that I'm in a unique position to help them solve. So those are some practical suggestions for you. Hope that you can take them and run with them. Thanks.
All right. Excellent. And Angela Heath?
So I'm going to tell a story, two actually, very quickly. Can't give you details. I have 5 minutes. Let's start with a real person who came to me and said, I need to earn income because I have been unemployed for over a year and I'm about to lose my house. She told me that she was like the ultimate in the highest clearance level in the government, and what she did was top secret. She couldn't tell me what she did. And it did not translate into civil opportunities. I thought she was nutty because I never worked in the government. I thought everything was translatable. But at any rate, so we start looking at taking a 360 look at who she was. What skills, what interests, what hobbies do you have that we could possibly monetize? She was a master quilter. So we worked together and we came up with at least a half dozen fabulous ideas on how she could actually earn income as a quilter. And I always think about, corporate stuff, not as much, to consumer directly because, that's where I feel more comfortable. So she left and she was so excited because she could see she had hope. She called me back in 3 days and she said, Angela, thank you, but I can't do any of this because you are expecting me to start a business and I don't know how to start a business. Well, that's what I'm here for, to help you understand the process. But because of her mindset, she lost her home. She moved in with her adult daughter that she had a previous good relationship with. But two women who are used to be the boss under the same roof spells what? Trouble. So that's not a good story. Now here's an interesting story that was not so good, but it flipped. So I had a consulting company for over 20 years, very successful. I went around the country doing my thing, having a good time, living a normal life. And then all of a sudden one day, my 12-year-old tells me he's having a hot flash, a boy. He ends up going to the hospital. Long story short, he was diagnosed with leukemia at 12. So I had built my company around me and my expertise, as I did speaking and training, so they wanted my face. So with a kid with leukemia, it's a 3.5-year treatment program, so I did not work for a year and a half. I went through all of my investments, all of my savings, some of his college funds, some of my retirement. I went through everything, but we never left him alone. My charge was the health, his dad's charge was the insurance and the money to pay for the bills, because I was taking care of him. So that happened. What did it do for me? It changed my life because I had been doing this work all along. What I do now, I've done it all along. For 15 years, I'm a gerontologist. I followed the baby boomers my entire career. Everything they did, I developed strategies to help companies, individuals, organizations, help them do it better, easier, quicker, what have you. So I did something that now I teach other people how to do, and that is to look at what are my own opportunities. And I developed my book, Do the Hustle Without the Hassle, because one of the things I realized is that most people told me they didn't want to go the slow way of building a business. They did not want to clear out their 401k and take a chance on something, and we know most small businesses fail. So I said there's got to be a better way, and this is a better way with the online gig economy, where you can take what you already know. I'm not asking you to learn a new skill, a talent, a hobby. What you already know, you take it online, a very simple process. You do a profile, you list all of your wonderful qualities, and either you go after gigs or they actually send gigs to you depending on the platform that you, and there are hundreds of these, hundreds. In my book, I list over 220. We vetted the ones that are in here. All of them have not been vetted, so you got to be careful. So mindset, taking what we already have and figuring out how we need to use it differently. But then there's the process of doing what we want to do. So I'm going to give you quickly, no explanation unless you ask me a question. What are the steps? The first step is to deal with the identity theft, which is what I'm talking about now. Realizing that you are more than what your last employer hired you to be. You are much more than that. So deal with the identity theft. Number 2, assessment. Taking a look at everything about you, going back and looking at what did people always tell you were excellent with early in your life. What do you enjoy? What are you passionate about? What keeps you up at night? Looking at all of that, really assessing what is your late life opportunity. Number 3, and this is the step that we really kind of alluded to, is readiness what? That's what I call it. Readiness what? So now that you figured all of this out, what are you going to do with it? There is sort of a continuum of opportunities for you to look at. Everyone won't work for you. So figuring out which one do you want to drive and test. The next step is the research. How are you going to do the research to make sure that the industry really wants what you have to offer? And that's where I tell people to take it to the streets. You can do research on your own very easily. I even did a workshop one time where I had the participants to go out on the street right then and there with their 5 questions and find people who look like they might be their ideal customers and talk to them. Why? Because most of us who had jobs all of the time, if we weren't in sales, we're afraid to approach people and sell. So the ideation comes out of that. Reiteration comes out of that. And then make the first dollar. Don't spend all of your money on buying beautiful business cards and you haven't made $1. Get $1 first and then buy the business